What's up, everyone? Jeff from Retro Arcade Gaming on YouTube, and today we're back with our largest port battle yet. In this series, we examine a classic arcade game and see how well or poorly it has been adapted to a variety of home console and computer systems over the years. Today, we're looking at perhaps the most famous video game character of all time, Pac-Man. Coincidentally, the timing aligns perfectly with the 45th anniversary of its North American release by Midway in October of 1980. In Japan, it debuted a few months earlier in May of 1980 as Pac-Man by Namco. Let me preface this video by saying that this will not be a comprehensive look at every Pac-Man port, clone, or homebrew. Honestly, we could dedicate an entire episode to a single system. Some platforms, like the Commodore 64, have 50 or more clones. The BBC Micro has more than 30. I use the word clones loosely because many of them aren't worth your time or my time. My goal is to focus on the most compelling releases for as many systems as possible. Because there are so many titles to cover, I'll try to keep my comments on each port concise, though I warn you, I do like to talk about video games, so brevity may occasionally go out the window. Also, I won't be playing for points. My objective is simply to clear the first level as quickly as possible. That said, every once in a while, my inner gamer will take over, and the urge to chase blue ghosts becomes irresistible. So, buckle up. We're about to take a stroll through over 105 variants of Pac-Man on roughly 60 different systems. As always, we start at the beginning with the original 1980 arcade release via MAME. Like every other platform, Pac-Man received numerous arcade releases over the years. For example, the 1996 arcade release of Namco Classic Collection Volume 2, which featured Pac-Man, Pac-Man Arrangement, Rally X, New Rally X, Rally X Arrangement, Dig Dug, and Dig Dug Arrangement. Let's take a look. A 25th anniversary collection was released in 2004 by Namco, featuring Pac-Man, Ms. Pac-Man, and Galaga. Unlike the original arcade release, you could continue play on this release with the addition of more coins. Recently, a 45th anniversary game was released. There have also been releases like Pac-Man's Arcade Party, 2010 I think, Pac-Man Pixel Bash, 2018, and a few others. With that, let's move on to the ports. I couldn't decide on a perfect way to organize them, so we'll go alphabetically by system, at least my version of the alphabet. Up first, the Amstrad Color PC received several Pac-Man ports over the years, starting with the Acorn Soft release in 1982. Initially released simply as Pac-Man, it was later retitled Snapper after pressure from Namco. Visually, this version holds up reasonably well, though it does fall a bit short on sound quality. In 1986, TNT published another port for the Amstrad Color PC. Personally, I think this version sounds much better than the Acorn Soft release, but I prefer the graphical appearance of the Acorn Soft version to this one. As always, you can be the judge for yourself. Rounding out the Amstrad Color PC lineup, we jump ahead to 2012 when a homebrew release was developed by Syx, that's SYX, who is Mauricio Munez Lucero, and Toto, T-O-T-O, who is Richard Gatineau. This version is based on the ZX Spectrum emulator, which we'll cover later, and uses the actual arcade ROMs. Visually, it looks fantastic, though the sound isn't perfectly authentic, and there are some speed issues, probably likely to my specific hardware and emulation setup. Over the years, both Android and iOS have seen a huge number of Pac-Man ports and adaptations. The current official release on both platforms is Pac-Man 256. I tried to play it, don't care much for it, so we're not going to be showing that here. Instead, for the Android, I'm going to highlight what I consider the best current alternative, which is Pac-Man rewritten by Cosmic Tunes. This version is also available on Windows PCs, offers two modes, Classic and Enhanced. You can even choose between classic arcade sounds or mobile-friendly MIDI sounds. Today, we'll focus on the Classic mode. The Enhanced mode includes procedurally generated mazes, special boosters, such as the ability to freeze ghosts, teleport, or mirror yourself. But for now, let's stick with the pure classic Pac-Man experience. Next, we jump to the Apple II, which received a notable Pac-Man clone with an interesting history. Taxman was developed by HAL Labs in 1981. Atari, who held the home console release rights for Pac-Man, promptly threatened legal action if HAL Labs continued distributing the game. Interestingly, Atari then used the Taxman code as the basis for their own official Apple II port, making only minor modifications. Today, we'll take a look at both versions, starting with Taxman by HAL Labs. Next up is the Atari port, released 2 years later in 1983. This version, unsurprisingly, is called Pac-Man. It's worth noting that HAL Labs did later release Taxman 2, featuring a different graphics set to distinguish it from the Atari version. Regardless, here's Atari's official Pac-Man port for the Apple II. The Apple II GS received a homebrew port in 2021 by Peter Hirschberg. I have to admit, it took me far too long to get this running just to capture a minute or so of gameplay. Unfortunately, I never did get the sound working. I'm not sure if that's an emulation issue on my end or if this version simply does not have sound. I also ran into some speed issues. The game either ran too fast or too slow. Again, basically the result of the clock settings on the emulator. I tried to come up with the best compromise I could, which is what you see here. Despite the challenges, it's still an interesting and visually faithful take on Pac-Man for the Apple II GS. If you have made it this far in the video, we arrived at the Atari 2600, the system behind a game that is often blamed for the video game crash of 1983, the Atari Soft Pac-Man port. Opinions on this game vary widely, and for good reason. Atari made several questionable decisions, including using a 4K cartridge instead of an 8K to save costs, and overproducing cartridges, manufacturing one for every Atari 2600 ever sold, plus an additional 2 million. On the plus side, I did own a cool Atari Pac-Man t-shirt back in the day, so there's that. Anyway, here's a look at Atari Soft's underwhelming Pac-Man port for the Atari 2600. In 2006, Dennis DeBro released Pac-Man 4K, a homebrew attempt to recreate Pac-Man on the Atari 2600 under the same 4K cartridge limitations as the original. Unlike the original, he wasn't under a tight deadline for the Christmas rush, which allowed for a more faithful implementation. While not perfect, it's a fascinating what could have been look at the 2600 version. The best 2600 Pac-Man experience, in my opinion, is a homebrew that was posted on the Atari Age forums by Dentar816 in 2017. Known simply as Pac-Man 8K, it takes full advantage of what would have been an 8K Atari cartridge. The colors and sounds are excellent, while still maintaining the classic 2600 Pac-Man look and feel. The Atari 5200 received its own official Pac-Man port from Atari in 1982. This version stretched horizontally to fit the system's monitor format, but overall it looks decent, sounds fairly good. While it doesn't perfectly capture the arcade experience, it's a solid representation for the 5200 hardware. The Atari 7800 has seen some of the best Pac-Man releases in the last 20 years or so. In 2006, a homebrew entitled Pac-Man Collection was released by Robert D. Crescenzo. While the sounds aren't perfectly arcade accurate, the visuals look great, and overall, it's a solid rendition for the 7800. We're going to look at today is the 40th anniversary edition of that same Pac-Man collection, which was released in 2020, obviously to coincide with the 40th anniversary of Pac-Man. Another notable homebrew was released in 2011 by Pac-Man Plus on the Atari Age forums, titled Pac-Man 320. This version is a scroller, doesn't feature a fully accurate maze layout. While it's not perfect, it's still an interesting take and worth mentioning in this roundup. The Atari 8-bit family received an official Pac-Man port from Atari in 1982. It shares similarities with the Atari 5200 version we looked at earlier. While it doesn't sound as crisp or play quite as smoothly in my opinion, it's still a decent representation of the arcade classic. Of course, as always, feel free to disagree if you have a different opinion. There was also a clone called Jawbreaker, released for the Atari 8-bit in 1981. It was later adapted for the Apple II and Commodore 64 as well. The resemblance to Pac-Man was so strong that Atari sought injunctions after seeing early leaks. To distinguish it and to keep from getting sued, the graphics were altered to feature a candy dental theme. Here's a look at Jawbreaker. Robert Leong released Pac-Man ST in 1991 for the Atari ST. This version features both classic and modern modes. It's presented as a scroller, which isn't my personal favorite, but visually and audibly it holds up quite well. During gameplay, I did experience some speed-ups and slowdowns. Not sure if that's due to the game itself or due to emulation. The Atari XE received a homebrew port in 2014 by user Tep392, who happens to be from my hometown. Titled Pac-Man Arcade, it's a solid implementation for the XE. While the sounds aren't authentic and the maze is slightly stretched to fit the screen, the gameplay is enjoyable. It ran a little fast on my setup, likely an emulation setting, but I personally don't mind a slightly faster paced Pac-Man. The Bali Astrocade received a Pac-Man clone called Muncher in 1983. This version doesn't play too badly, and the sound effects are fairly decent for the system. For Astrocade owners at the time, it was likely a welcome addition to their game library, giving them a taste of Pac-Man without leaving home. As I mentioned in the introduction, the BBC Micro had numerous Pac-Man clones. Probably around 34 to 35 in total, maybe even more. Some were quite good, while others were frankly not worth playing at all. The original release, similar to the Amstrad Color PC, was Snapper and was released by Acorn Soft in 1982. Visually, it holds up reasonably well. Sound isn't great, plays a little fast, but overall, it's really nothing to complain about. In 1983, Superior Software released Nasher for the BBC Micro. This one looks pretty good. The sounds leave something to be desired. Overall, it's a solid release for the system. A Pac-Man port was developed by Atari Soft for the ColecoVision, but it never saw an official release, so it's often considered a prototype. Visually, it looks very similar to other Atari Soft ports, and the sound is quite good, making it an interesting historical piece. In 2008, Opcode Games released a homebrew called Pac-Man Collection for the ColecoVision. This version includes a remade version of Miss Pac-Man as well, and features much improved visuals and sounds compared to the prototype. It's a solid and enjoyable port for the system. We would be remiss if we did not mention the Coleco Classic tabletop handheld released in 1981. It was widely popular with kids. Personally, I didn't own one. I don't think we could afford one. But it remains a nostalgic piece of Pac-Man history. The Commodore 64 received an Atari soft port in 1983. Visually, it looks quite good, and the sound isn't bad either. I still own this in a sealed floppy in the box until just a few years ago when I sold it on eBay. There are numerous Pac-Man variants for the Commodore 64. Most are not worth discussing. One of the better unfinished projects is Pacu Pacu, a 2012 preview by Jason Knight, created to test his skills in 6502 machine language programming. It's not a bad implementation, and it's fun to play. In 2022, Nick Sherman released his version of Pac-Man for the Commodore 64. This one sounds great, looks excellent, and in my opinion, is the best pure Pac-Man release for the Commodore 64. Finally, in 2024, LC Games released Random Pack for the Commodore 64. This version features procedurally generated mazes and bonus rounds. Both sound and graphics are impressive, making it a very nice addition to the Commodore 64 Pac-Man library. The Commodore Amiga got a port in 2021 released by JOTD called Pac-Man 500. This is an excellent port featuring very authentic sounds that capture the essence of the arcade original. Visually and audibly, it holds up extremely well and is a standout among modern Amiga releases. The Sega Dreamcast received its Namco Museum release in 2000, featuring Pac-Man among other classic titles. As expected, from a Namco Museum release, it looks and sounds fantastic, recreates the arcade experience on the Dreamcast about as faithfully as you can. The Fairchild Channel F, released in 1976, was the first home console to feature a microprocessor. The F in Fairchild Channel F stands for fun, in case you were wondering. Fairchild fans were treated to a homebrew Pac-Man cartridge by Blackbird, released sometime around 2004 or 2009. Not sure. I've seen it mentioned as both in different places. The unofficial release, known as Video Cart 27, is actually quite impressive considering the age and limitation of the system. Hit detection can be tricky at first, but overall, it looks and plays like Pac-Man, making it a noteworthy entry in the early home console adaptations. The Fujitsu FM7 received a Pac-Man port from DIMPA in 1984. This version rotates the original arcade maze 90 degrees counterclockwise to fit the system's display. Visually, it looks good, though the sound isn't particularly strong. Despite that, it remains a playable and interesting version of Pac-Man for the FM7. The Sega Game Gear received a Pac-Man port from Namco in 1991. This version sounds very good and looks great, faithfully capturing the arcade experience. Due to the small screen, it's presented as a scroller, which is a practical solution for handheld gameplay, even if it's not my personal favorite presentation style. The Nintendo Game Boy received a Pac-Man port from Namco in 1991. This release is fairly standard for the Game Boy, but I was pleasantly surprised by the sound quality, which is better than expected. Due to the small screen size, it's a scroller, again, not my favorite format, but really, it's the only way to deliver a playable Pac-Man experience on the Game Boy. The Game Boy Advance received Pac-Man Collection from Namco in 2001. This compilation features Pac-Man, Pac-Man Arrangement, Pac-Attack, and Pac-Mania. It gives players the option to play Pac-Man on either a scrolling play field or full screen mode, at least for the original Pac-Man game. Visually and audibly, it's very well done. We'll start by looking at the scrolling playfield variant. Next, here's a quick look at the full screen variant from the same collection. Keep in mind, on the original hardware, you could actually rotate your Game Boy Advance counterclockwise as well, and it would actually take up the entire screen. Namco also released Namco Museum 50th Anniversary on the Game Boy Advance. Again, offers both scrolling and full screen modes. The scrolling variant looks very similar to the Pac-Man collection version. The full screen variant on the 50th anniversary compilation doesn't preserve the original aspect ratio as well as the Pac-Man collection does. It stretches to fit the screen. However, if you rotate the Game Boy Advance 90 degrees, like we just talked about earlier, it looks great. The Game Boy Color received a Pac-Man port titled Pac-Man Special Color Edition in 1999 due to the limited screen size. This version scrolls the maze, obviously, While the sounds aren't arcade accurate, the graphics and gameplay are quite good, making it a solid handheld Pac-Man experience. The GameCube received a Namco Museum release in 2002, featuring Pac-Man along with other classic Namco titles. As with other Namco Museum compilations, it looks and sounds excellent, recreating the arcade experience almost faithfully. In 2005, Namco released Namco Museum 50th Anniversary for the GameCube. This edition celebrates Pac-Man's legacy and continues the trend of high-quality visuals and sound, making it a solid pick for GameCube owners. The Intellivision received a Pac-Man port from Atari Soft in 1983. This version is not one of the stronger ports, as the maze is much smaller than in the original arcade game. Despite this limitation, the sound quality is surprisingly good, and it remains a playable adaptation for the system. The MS-DOS platform received an official Atari Soft port in 1982. This version uses the 4-color CGA display, features basic PC speaker sounds, which aren't the most impressive, but from a gameplay perspective, it holds up reasonably well. In 1996, Cham Programming released a homebrew Pac-Man port for MS-DOS. True to Cham Programming style, this version looks very close to the arcade original, and the sounds are fairly authentic, though slightly tinny and lacking punch. Another MS-DOS homebrew, Pacu Pacu, was released in 2011 by Death Shadow, who also happens to be Jason Knight, who created the Commodore 64 version we looked at earlier by the same name. This take on Pac-Man is highly pixelated and blocky by design, but it plays well and offers a somewhat fresh visual style, which is a nice departure when you're playing Pac-Mans on 100+ different systems. The MSX received a Pac-Man port from Namco in 1984. This version plays well, and the sound is decent, though it has a slightly cartoonish visual style. Despite the stylistic difference, it's a solid, enjoyable adaptation of the original arcade game. The NEC PC-88 received a Pac-Man port from DIMPA in 1983. To account for the horizontal-vertical screen discrepancy, again, they rotated the arcade maze 90 degrees counterclockwise. The clone Pac-Boy was also released for the PC-88 by PSK in 1982. Flips the maze 90 degrees again. It looks good, sounds decent. As with the NEC 6001 version, it tends to play slightly fast. Again, more likely due to emulation than the original design. The NEC PC-98 received a Pac-Man port by Wiz in 1992. This version retains the correct maze orientation and features good graphics with decent sound. Overall, it's a faithful and enjoyable adaptation of the arcade classic for the PC-98. The Neo Geo Pocket Color received an official Namco port in 1999. This version is what I call a handheld done right. Not necessarily because it looks or sounds better than other handhelds, because it was one of the first that offered the player the choice between a full screen or scrolling playfield, something many of the handheld versions did not provide. Here's a look at the scrolling variant first. And here's the full screen variant on the Neo Geo Pocket Color. The titles available for the Nintendo Entertainment System get a bit confusing. Tengen released the first Pac-Man port, officially licensed by Nintendo, in a black cart in 1988. Several years later, After Tengen figured out how to bypass the NES lockout chip and avoid paying licensing fees to Nintendo, they released a second version, identical to the first, but in a gray cart. The Tengen releases are based off the Famicom code and are almost identical to that version. Namco released their own Pac-Man cart for the NES late in the game in 1993. It, in essence, is identical to the Tengen version, the only difference being the title screen. Tengen version says Tengen on the title screen, while this one says Namco. You can purchase this version on the Wii and the Wii U via the Virtual Console or WiiWare. We'll look at that a little bit later. The Nintendo 3DS received the Pac-Man and Galaga Dimensions collection in 2011. This compilation features the original arcade versions of Pac-Man and Galaga, as well as Pac-Man Championship Edition, Galaga Legions, and two games unique to this title, Pac-Man Tilt and Galaga 3D Impact. The Nintendo 64 received a Namco Museum port in 1999 entitled Namco Museum 64. This version looks and sounds great, providing a faithful adaptation of the original arcade experience. There's not much to add beyond that. It's a solid and reliable way to play Pac-Man on the Nintendo 64. The Nintendo Famicom received a Namco release in 1984. This version closely resembles the MSX port, though it features slightly more detailed ghost graphics. The sound is well done, making it a faithful adaptation of the arcade original for Famicom players. The Famicom Disk System received a Namco release in 1990. While it's another solid port, it doesn't look significantly different from the previous Nintendo versions we've seen. The sound may be slightly improved, though after listening to Pac-Man sounds for 2 weeks straight, that could just be my imagination. Overall, it's a very nice rendition, maintaining the classic arcade feel. This is going to be the most modern release you're going to get from me. Namco Museum Arcade Pack, released for the Nintendo Switch in 2018. True to form, the Namco Museum releases, this version is a spot-on recreation of the original Pac-Man arcade game, delivering authentic graphics and sounds while taking full advantage of the modern console's capabilities. Your Windows PC has seen several notable Pac-Man releases over the years. Microsoft's Return of Arcade, released for Windows 3.1 and Windows 95 in 1996, faithfully replicates the arcade experience both visually and in terms of gameplay. In 2009, Namco released Namco All Stars, Pac-Man, and Dig Dug for Windows PCs. This compilation features two modes, Classic and Enhanced. The Classic mode stays true to the original arcade game, preserving both look and sound. The Enhanced mode offers subtle visual modifications, such as a shadow effect on the playfield and slightly muted colors, while the sound is the same with a somewhat mild echo effect added for atmosphere. I tend to find it somewhat annoying. Like many other systems, the Pico 8 has numerous Pac-Man clones and homebrew titles. One of the best releases, in my opinion, is Pico Man, developed by Urban Monk in 2022. Does not include sound, captures the gameplay well. Another notable Pico 8 version is Pac-Man by GPI, although I couldn't get it to load for this video. Here's Pico Man. The PlayStation received Namco Museum Volume 1 in 1996. This title is a solid representation of the original arcade game, featuring accurate visuals and sound. From what I've read online, it's not direct emulation. Namco deconstructed the original code and rebuilt it as closely as possible, and it shows. Overall, it looks and plays very well. Besides, I read that online, it has to be true. The PlayStation 2 received multiple Namco Museum releases. The first release in 2001 is a faithful port that captures the arcade experience well, both in graphics and sound. In 2005, Namco released the 50th anniversary Namco Museum. This version looks and sounds fantastic, offering a polished and enjoyable way to play Pac-Man on the PlayStation 2. This video is so long I'm starting to lose my voice. The PlayStation 3 received several Namco Museum releases. Namco Museum Essentials, released in 2009, features Pac-Man, Galaga, Dig Dug, Xevious, Dragon Spirit, and Xevious Resurrection. This compilation emulates Pac-Man perfectly, providing a faithful arcade experience for PlayStation 3 players. In 2014, Pac-Man Museum was released via the PlayStation Network. Published by Namco, it delivers exactly what you would expect from a modern console emulation of Pac-Man, faithfully preserving the original gameplay, graphics, and sound. The PlayStation Portable received a Namco Museum Battle Collection in 2005. This compilation looks excellent on the PlayStation Portable. I personally had trouble getting the sound to work properly during emulation. On original hardware, it likely plays and sounds great, offering a faithful handheld Pac-Man experience. In 2004, Simon Owen developed his own Pac-Man clone from scratch for the Sam Coupe. While it doesn't include sounds or intermissions, it looks very good and plays well, capturing the core Pac-Man experience. Simon also created a Pac-Man emulator for the Sam Coupe, as well as another system we'll cover later. This emulator runs the original Pac-Man ROMs almost unmodified. While the sounds are slightly off, the overall implementation is impressive and faithful to the arcade original. The Sega Genesis never received a standalone Pac-Man port. Instead, Pac-Man was included within the side-scrolling adventure game Pac-Man 2: The New Adventures, which was available on both Genesis and the Super Nintendo. By visiting the in-game arcade during gameplay, you could access a playable version of Pac-Man built into the game. For this video, we're going to use the built-in password to reach it. The Sega Master System received a homebrew in 2025 called Pac-Man Master Museum, developed by Lack of Track. This title features two modes, Arcade and Smooth. Arcade mode faithfully replicates the original arcade look, but does allow players to select difficulty, number of lives, and bonus awards directly from the menu. Smooth mode adds extra detail and color to the visuals. To be honest, the difference is subtle. I didn't notice much while emulating, but it may be worth checking out further on original hardware. The Sharp X1 received a Pac-Man port from DIMPA in 1983. This version retains the original maze orientation, but stretches the graphics slightly to fit the 4x3 screen. Overall, it looks good, sounds decent, providing a faithful adaptation for X1 owners. The Sharp X68000 saw a Pac-Man release in 1989 by Sharp themselves. It maintains the original maze orientation, looks visually impressive. The sounds are a bit too digital for my taste, but it still provides a solid experience. In 1993, IT released their version for the X68000. This iteration looks very good and improves upon the earlier digital sound, though it still retains a slightly electronic feel. Overall, it's a strong addition to the X68000 library. The arcade game series, released by Namco in 2016 for Steam, Xbox 360, PlayStation 3, and PlayStation 4, includes Pac-Man, Galaga, and Dig Dug as individual titles. The Steam version of Pac-Man remains faithful to the original arcade release, offering classic gameplay, visuals, and sound. The Epoch Super Cassette Vision received its own interpretation of Pac-Man titled Pac Monster, released in 1982. This features a much smaller maze with only 4 quadrants and 2 ghosts. Additionally, players must pass over each pellet multiple times to remove it. Despite its simplicity, Pac Monster is actually surprisingly fun. As the game progresses, it becomes challenging, proving that even with limited hardware, a compelling Pac-Man experience is possible. As we mentioned with the Sega Genesis, the Super NES never received a standalone Pac-Man release. You could play Pac-Man through the side-scrolling adventure game Pac-Man 2: The New Adventures. As with the Sega Genesis, we will access Pac-Man via the saved password feature. The Texas Instrument TI-99-4A had a couple of Pac-Man releases. The first was Munchman, a unique clone where the goal is essentially reversed. You fill the maze with chain links instead of eating dots. I'm including this release because when I owned a TI-99-4A, this is the version of Pac-Man that I played. Atari Soft also released their official Pac-Man port in 1983. Like many early versions, the sounds are a bit crude, but the graphics look pretty good and it plays reasonably well, albeit slightly slower, though that may just be an emulation issue. Tomitronic released a handheld Pac-Man in 1982. This version only included 18 pellets and 2 power pellets. Gameplay was unique in that you could only eat pellets by traveling over them from right to left. The TRS-80 had several Pac-Man clones. One of the first decent ones, in my opinion, was Pac-Tac by Computerware in 1981. While the sounds are basic, delivered through the internal speaker, the game plays well and you can adjust difficulty levels. The ghosts in this one are actually quite brutal, making it a somewhat challenging experience on the more difficult levels. In 1997, Nicholas Marentes released a homebrew called Pac-Man Tribute, which is nicely done and visually appealing. I've played this version with sound before. Somehow I could not get the sound to play in this capture. A Z80 transcode homebrew was released in 2017 by Glenn Hewlett for the Coco 3. You have to supply the ROM files, but it looks and sounds great. And though it's a scroller, it shows more of the screen than most scrollers, making gameplay somewhat more enjoyable. The VIC-20 received an official Atari soft port in 1983. This version is basic, limited by the hardware, and while the sounds are not terrible, the maze design is quite simplistic. HAL Laboratory, who created Taxman for the Apple II, released Jelly Monsters in 1981 as a Pac-Man clone for the VIC-20. This version features a unique maze layout, and the sounds are decent. Personally, I prefer this over the Atari soft port we just looked at. Namco Museum Remix was released in 2007 for the Nintendo Wii. Namco Museum Mega Remix was released for the Wii in 2010. Interestingly, the original Pac-Man game is only available on the 2010 Mega Remix title, not the 2007 remix. The 2007 remix did include arrangement mode of Pac-Man, but not just the standard classic arcade version. Here is the Mega Remix version of Pac-Man from 2010 on the Nintendo Wii. As we mentioned earlier, Namco also released the NES version of Pac-Man to the WiiWare Virtual Console in 2015, available on both the Wii and the Wii U. The Game Boy Advance Pac-Man collection was also released to WiiWare in 2014, available again on both the Wii and the Wii U. The Xbox received Namco Museum in 2002, featuring Pac-Man. This release is faithful to the arcade experience. In 2005, the 50th anniversary release of Namco Museum arrived on the Xbox, again providing classic Pac-Man gameplay with updated presentation. The Xbox 360 saw Namco release Pac-Man for the Xbox Live Arcade in 2005. It was also available on the original Xbox. This is a modern take, but faithful to the arcade original. "2014 saw Pac-Man Museum released on the Xbox Live Arcade. As with other Namco Museum titles, it's exactly what you would expect. Namco Museum Virtual Arcade came out for the Xbox 360 in 2008. I do not have a copy of that to showcase. Sorry. The ZX Spectrum saw both official and homebrew Pac-Man versions. Atari Soft released an official port in 1984. It looks cruder than some other ports, but it still plays okay. DJL Software released a clone called Z-Man in 1983 featuring slightly different maze layouts, but it's very similar gameplay to the Atari Soft version. In 2011, Simon Owen developed a homebrew based on the original arcade ROMs. This version handles the Spectrum's infamous color clash very well and looks and sounds great. Most recently, in 2024, Marco Leal released his version of Pac-Man for the Spectrum. This version closely resembles the Atari Soft port, but with a maze layout that matches the original arcade game more accurately. The NEC 6001 received a Pac-Man port from DIMPA in 1984. This version looks decent, though a bit pixelated, and the sound is acceptable, if not exceptional. Unlike some other DIMPA releases, it maintains the original maze orientation, preserving the classic layout. The NEC 6001 also received a clone entitled Pac and Boy, released by PSK in 1982. This version rotates the maze 90 degrees clockwise, features minimal graphics and sound. It also plays slightly fast, which is likely an emulation quirk rather than a design choice. In 2009, Paul McAfee released a homebrew Pac-Man for the used box. This version plays well, and while the sounds aren't arcade accurate, they're not terrible either. For Pac-Man's 30th anniversary, Google created a playable Google Doodle. It plays as expected, though the maze is adapted to resemble the Google logo, making for a fun and unique experience. Just as I thought I had this video wrapped up, Google dropped another doodle to celebrate Pac-Man's 45th anniversary, this time with a Halloween theme. This was created in conjunction with Namco. Here's a look at it. And there you have it, our remastered port battle featuring 106 Pac-Man ports, clones, and homebrews. What didn't you see? Most modern releases for the Nintendo Switch, the PS4, the PS5, the Xbox One, the Xbox Series X and S. Some notable modern releases not covered: Pac-Man Museum Plus for the PS4, PS5, Switch, Steam, Xbox One, Xbox Series X and S. It was also on Game Pass briefly. The arcade game series, which we looked at the Steam version, is also available on the PlayStation 4, PS5, the Xbox One, and the Series X and S. Hamster's Arcade Archives are available on the Nintendo Switch. The Namco Museum Archives Volume 1 is available on the Switch, the Xbox One, and the Xbox Series X and S. We also didn't cover a majority of the handheld units or plug-and-play devices like the Jax Pacific and of course, the arcade one-up machines, which are another story entirely. That's it. I may never play Pac-Man again in my life. I may not ever be able to talk again after filming all of this. I hope you enjoyed this deep dive. If so, hit that like button, subscribe, and share with your retro gaming friends. Until next time, happy gaming. Peace.